In March, I bought a ticket to Revzilla's Get On ADV Fest. The only problem is that I need to get from New Jersey to the Black Hills of South Dakota, and the idea of 1,700 miles of interstate is not appealing. So I slowly added things to my map, and by July, I had a route put together for the way out and some idea of how to get home. I did a complete service on the Tenere, packed my bags for adventure, and set off for my first camp spot in Pennsylvania on a Friday afternoon. So come join me as I ride most of the way across the country. It's a quick trip to the Pennsylvania border at Milford. The town has been around since the mid-1700s and gets its name from the mills that have been built along the banks of the Delaware River, like the old mill on the left that has been sitting empty as long as I can remember. This is one of the few bridges along this stretch of the Delaware River that is actually paved. Most are the open grate type that were very unnerving when first learning to ride. Welcome to Pennsylvania. I am trying to take back roads whenever possible, but with a little more than 5 days to be in the Black Hills, I am going to have to make up at least some of that time on the highway, especially in the areas closer to home that I'm more familiar with. Is that the food court soft drink cup from my childhood? This stretch of road is always under construction. This guy passed up a nice wide shoulder and instead parked his broken car at the beginning of a blind corner. Don't be like this guy. That is a fire department hovercraft. That's so cool. I'll be traveling through several of the small towns in Pennsylvania's coal country. We're in Pottsville, PA. Home of Yuengling Lager, famous for being brewed in a damp cave. This is the Big Mine Run Geyser. Big Mine Run Geyser is not a natural geyser like we all think of in Yellowstone, but at least you don't have to wait in line for it. It is just outside Ashland, Pennsylvania, and is the result of flooded coal mines abandoned in the 30s, pushing water out of a ventilation hole. I have read it can get as high as 15 feet depending on how much rain has fallen. Very sulfurous. Just down the road is Centralia, a coal mining town in Pennsylvania infamous for having an underground coal fire that has been burning for the last 60 years. In 1962, a fire at the dump ignited a coal seam. Despite millions of dollars and many attempts at extinguishing it, the fire continues to this day. The railroad used to go along this street, but it was torn up in 1966. Due to sinkholes and dangerous gases, the government purchased the properties of those willing to sell and tore down the houses. A few people held out, though, and you can still see those houses standing alone. With nearly all of the buildings demolished, the remaining row homes give a hint to what the town was like. Here's an aerial view from 1969, and these are the houses that remain today. Riding around on the empty, overgrown streets, it's difficult to imagine a bustling town here. And when the remaining residents move or pass away, their houses will disappear as well. Unfortunately, the buckled, abandoned, graffiti-covered highway into town has now been buried. There looks to be some sort of storm on the horizon. It's amazing to think about just how much grain is in those silos. I'm crossing the Susquehanna River into Danville, Pennsylvania. I spotted this from the main road and had to go take a look. Cool old bridge. I was starting to get little spits of rain, but I was being stubborn and not wanting to put my rain gear on yet. The storm ahead is looking ever more ominous. I'm just entering Milton, and it's definitely time to find some dinner somewhere inside. There's a storm coming. Milton is a picturesque little town on the west branch of the Susquehanna River. It was founded in 1769. Front Street is full of shops and murals and beautiful old buildings. and I managed to find a little diner to have some dinner and wait for the storm to pass over. Had a quick dinner and missed all of the heavy rain that was coming. Now on to the campsite. I crossed the west branch of the Susquehanna River and found some fuel. And it wasn't very long before I was on the gravel roads of Bald Eagle State Forest. The roads in this state forest range from paved to nice well-groomed gravel to rocky hill climbs. This region is made up of many parallel ridges and valleys caused by plate tectonic collisions a long time ago, which means there are lots of mountain pass roads. I really need to spend more time here. It's not that far from home, and the riding is quite good. Not long before I got to my campsite, I saw a black bear running off into the woods. I didn't catch it on camera, and seeing one before camp isn't the best feeling. I don't really want to be a bear burrito. I made it to my campsite next to Black Gap Vista. I avoided most of the rain by hanging out in a little diner, and it's time to go set up camp. This is a pretty excellently placed campsite. The short walk to a nice view of the valley below, and it's a little ways off the Forest Service Road. The only downside is that the dispersed sites here have to be reserved online, and after the convenience fees, it costs right around $20, which seems a little steep. Oh, and the mosquitoes were out tonight. I'm really happy I brought my head net. I rode 177 miles. Not too bad for an afternoon ride, and it gives me a good start into Pennsylvania. I read about George Wyman's 1903 motorbicycle trip across the U.S. and listened to the birds before falling asleep. It sounded just like the forest in the Hunger Games. I'm told that bird is a wood thrush. Good morning from Bald Eagle State Forest. Got my tent packed up and it's 6:25. We're above the sea of clouds. Oh, that's pretty. I had been wanting to go to the Get On ADV Fest in the Black Hills, but the idea of riding interstates all the way there wasn't appealing. I ran into Spurge from Revzilla at a dual sport ride in the Pine Barrens, and his enthusiasm for this event pushed me over the edge. It's a foggy morning. One church for sale. Two church for sale. Ah, ah, ah. The little village of Revzilla is charming, but feels quite isolated. It's always fun to start the day with some nice mountain roads. So a couple of months ago, I sent in for a rail pass for this rail trail, and they sent me this little sticker, and now I can ride this old railroad. This is the Beech Creek Railroad. It was built in 1884 with the backing of the New York Central Railroad, who wanted to ensure access to bituminous coal. It traveled between Mahaffey and Jersey Shore. No, not that Jersey Shore. It's actually pretty funny how the town got its name. The two brothers who laid out the town were from New Jersey, so people in a rival settlement on the opposite side of the river started calling it Jersey Shore. Well, that name stuck, and the town officially changed its name to Jersey Shore in 1826. Despite being hundreds of miles from the coast, the name has apparently confused more than a few tourists. Anyway, back to the rail trail. It is now called the Snowshoe Rail Trail, and there's an organization that maintains it mostly for ATVs, but dual sports and adventure bikes are welcome. You can order a permit by mail like I did, or you can get one from several stores in the area. While these rail trails are pretty flat and not very curvy, I enjoy riding along them and seeing the route that passengers would have taken 140 years ago. And it's interesting to see the routing they chose to get a nice flat grade. So riding an old railroad bed is cool and all, but the real reason to come here is this tunnel. And it's called Peale Tunnel, and it's pretty long. Ready? Okay, so it's not that long as far as tunnels go. You can see the other end the whole time, but it's still a pretty good novelty. The floor is made up of railroad ballast and puddles, which is pretty interesting in the dark. I rode through here a number of years ago in my KLR, and I remember it being a bit more sketchy. The GoPro settings prevented it from seeing much more than the GPS screen and the end of the tunnel. Note to self, check the ISO settings before recording the dark. The Insta360, on the other hand, did a pretty good job. This shot of the tunnel exit is really cool, so we'll just chalk it up to happy accidents. I really enjoy riding through these old rock cuts. It must be something about the walls rising up around you. Looks like we're at the end of the line. Before 2013, you could ride across this viaduct, but for liability reasons, it has been closed. Here's a clip from YouTube with a better view. The link to the whole video is in the description. It would have been so cool to ride across this thing. The forest road connecting to the rail trail is considerably rockier. But I made it. I know it didn't look like much on camera, but it certainly had my attention. Now it's time to get out of the woods and make some real western progress. Unfortunately, that means hopping on Interstate 80 for a little while. Foggy interstates are always a bit unsettling. Someone's having a bad day. It looks like one of the brakes got too hot and caught the tire on fire. It's scary. 130 some miles later, and I've missed the Welcome to Ohio sign. I'm just starting to get some sprinkles, but being the stubborn person that I am, I'm not looking for a place to stop and put my rain gear on. Hey, that truck's not going the right way. Still haven't put rain gear on yet. Hey, there's that highlighter yellow rain jacket. I ended up stopping on the side of the interstate to put the rain gear on. Definitely not my favorite place to do that. Will I ever learn? It's raining pretty hard, but at least I'm off the interstate for the rest of the day. Welcome to the land of never-ending corn and soybeans. I'm just passing through Napoleon, Ohio on the Maumee River. That school looks suspiciously like an old factory. Welcome to Indiana, the Hoosier State. Here's the old Auburn Electric and Waterworks building. And just down the road is the Auburn, Cord, and Deusenburg Museum, situated in the old Auburn headquarters. Auburn was founded in 1900 and came out of a carriage company dabbling in these newfangled horseless carriages. They sold their first automobile in 1903 with a staggering 6 horsepower. In 1919, the company was sold to Chicago investors. Meanwhile, Deusenburg became an automobile company in 1920 and produced their first car a year later. In 1929, Auburn and Deusenburg become subsidiaries of the Cord Corporation, and the first Cord automobile is produced. Which explains why these 3 makes are all under one roof. Here's a wild car I've never heard of. The most iconic car Auburn produced was the Speedster, which had a plaque on the dash certifying that it will do 100 miles an hour. I like the apprentice marks on the drill press. Sadly, the company went bankrupt in 1937. The manufacturing facilities were used to make Jeeps during World War II, and after being sold a few times, this building was bought by enthusiasts in 1974 and eventually became the museum that is here today. They must have some sort of shrink ray around here. If you're near Auburn, Indiana, I definitely recommend checking this out. On the left is the maintenance shop for the cars in the museum. I went to get a campsite at Chena Lake State Park, but the only thing left was a field full of people and children. No thanks. I had some dinner at a fun little Elvis-themed drive-in and looked for a campsite. I found something promising on the Tippecanoe River, which I think is the best river name I've ever heard. So I headed further west, past Webster Lake and the cute little town of Etna Green. I so much prefer to travel off of the interstate so I can see places like this, even if it takes considerably longer. More soybeans? And more corn. There were quite a few scattered thunderstorms in the direction I was heading. Here's a fun roadside attraction, a round barn. These never really caught on, did they? I got distracted and went the wrong way out of the barn parking lot. Time for some U-turn practice. So I got another look at this thing. The campsite on the Tippecanoe River had plenty of space, and the thunderstorms missed me. I covered 563 miles today. If you're still here, thanks for coming along. And stay tuned for my trip across the Midwest. I can totally make it, right?